Hello, I'm Jennifer Conaway. I'm super excited to be here with you and so glad so many people have had an opportunity to listen for these last 2 days. And we have so much more in front of us that I don't know. I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. But I'm going to share with you the 3 pillars of profitability, integrating spirituality into your biggest work in the world, whether that's a nonprofit or your corporate business or your solo business, whatever it is. Um, so this is so important to me that you have everything you need to show up 100% authentically in your business, because my career in business didn't start out that way. I started with a Fortune 100 company, was super fortunate to get in there. But, I was the square peg they were constantly trying to cram into that round hole. And I was never comfortable. And my skills were never really utilized. And it got to the point finally where I thought, wow, I can't do this anymore. There has to be another way. So this was mid 2000. So I hopped on that coaching wagon and got really lucky, got in with a really good coaching program and started to use numbers and started to understand the power of numbers in a business. And I'm sure some of you have heard this statistic that when you're doing discovery sessions, out of those discovery sessions, if you sell 1 in 5, then you actually have a really good sales rate. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, with that information, I can estimate how many client or how many discovery calls I need to have to reach a certain revenue. Or I can figure out maybe how long it's going to take me to do that many calls to get us to a certain amount of revenue, to have a certain number of people. But there's just so much power in that. So that's what really started my journey into data and starting to love data and analytics. And it also gave me that first coaching role, also gave me all of those random online skills that you need that we were really learning in that space. And I had the opportunity to go to work for one of the biggest online personal development folks in the country. And she's known internationally. And I was super privileged to be able to run her mastermind. Now, this was a multi-million-dollar mastermind, kind of like running a business within a business. And not only did I have to do all the operational stuff, but I got to work with some of the clients. And they ranged from folks that had created $1 million businesses and sold them to people that showed up at our events with a napkin and their idea for a business written on the napkin. So it was this huge range. And something became really apparent to me. Because I was working with a personal development person that had a formula for creating your business, I started to call it a business in a box. And I started to notice that certain people did really, really well with that formula, and other people didn't do so well. And for some reason, folks that had more of a spiritual bent, more of a business that wasn't quite standard coaching, had a little bit more trouble really fitting into that business. And I was privileged to work with them and find ways for them to use that formula that served their business. But after a while, I really couldn't do that with integrity anymore, because I knew there was a different way. I knew there was a better way to serve those folks. And that's when I started my business all over again, where I get to work with spiritual, heart-led, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, where we take traditional business methods and your beautiful, unicorny, spiritual tarot reading self and merge those two pieces together. And a perfect example of that is Catherine. She was a pain specialist and she was having trouble with her marketing. We were working on a couple different things, but she really wasn't happy with her marketing. And I sat down and had a long conversation with her about it. And eventually I said, Catherine, you're really heart-led and your marketing just isn't showing any of your heart. And she actually looked at me and got tears in her eyes and said, I have never had anybody say that to me before. And that's why I do what I do, because each one of you is unique and special. And that specialness needs to be brought into everything you do. So my primary role is to create strategic growth maps for people, right? And I do this after learning a whole lot about you and finding a way to really grow your business. My philosophy is that business is not just about the bottom line. Business is about your purpose, finding your purpose and living that purpose. And spirituality is not about religion or dogma or any specific group. It's really about your connection to something deeper and infusing that into everything that you do. We're living in a 3D world. It just is what it is. And some of us are so connected to the 5D, right? But more and more you hear people are becoming more spiritual. And I put it in air quotes because they will sometimes put it in air quotes, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that you're just adding additional practices to your religious practice. It can mean that you've gone completely a different direction. But either way, you're talking about the energetic universe, and people are talking about the energy within themselves and the energy from the planet. And it's really time to marry that 5D spiritual version of who we are with the 3D traditional business methods that are available to us. No longer is that spiritual side of us the deficit that it was, or it could have been 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And Tracy is a perfect example of that. She is a client that moved from Colorado out to North Carolina, sold her very profitable business in Colorado and wanted to start over here. So she started looking around for a business coach consultant to work with. She actually reviewed over 40 business consultants. And the reason she decided to work with me is because I talked about spirituality on my website. Another great example of that is Tammy. She was a very, very successful Wall Street human resources person, left that to become a career coach and to really start to dig into her spirituality. So she was also looking for somebody that could talk about these traditional sides of what we do and marry that with the spiritual that we're all moving into. I called my business Conscious Business Answers because I know that there's so much more than what we see and hear on a daily basis, and that we're in a position to be able to create consciously in a way that impacts the entire world. So it's time to integrate that 3D and the spiritual with strategy and planning. So my definition of spirituality, just to remind everybody, is not religious. It's as simple as, do you meditate? Do you take that walk 3 times a day to ground? Do you look at tarot cards? It's really something that's wide open and allows you to define it on your own. But spirituality is so important to me because I know as a spiritual person, the values that I carry bleed not only into my personal life, but also into my business. And for my business to flourish, I have to be completely in alignment, heart, body, and soul. And that's why integrating the spiritual parts of your business into your spiritual values into your business is so important to me, because we all know without alignment, everything is so much harder. So the 3 pillars of profitability are vulnerability, authenticity, and redefining productivity. So let's start by talking about vulnerability. You know, we're in a world where it is super easy to scold and deride and judge people with almost impunity because, on social, you could be anybody. So if you're willing to share really vulnerably the most important pieces of who you are, you truly up-level the know, like, and trust factor for people that are watching you, for potential clients. And a common belief is that business is purely professional and there are no emotions involved. And when I talk about vulnerability, people tend to think about the emotional parts of who they are. But I want to expand that a little bit and say vulnerability isn't necessarily about the emotions. It's about the intuition. It's about sharing your guidance that you receive every day. And sure, there is definitely an emotional piece to that, but that sharing of who you are, of how you interact with the universe, and how you interact with nature opens the door to a completely different kind of vulnerability. And when you open that door, you give other people the opportunity to walk through it. You give people the opportunity to start talking about it to their family, to their friends. And isn't that really what we're here to do? That's part of your purpose, I'm sure, is to give folks the opportunity to expand. And this is just one more way to do that. Sharing vulnerably is an act of courage and an act of connection. And I mention it first, and I've made it the first pillar because I think it's just so important. So there are questions I get about, well, what actually is vulnerable sharing? Like, what should I share and what shouldn't I share? Well, shoulds, we don't always pay attention to shoulds, and that's great. But I do have some recommendations about what specifically to share and what you probably shouldn't share. So things that you do want to share are anything within your personal boundaries. So my husband is not on social. So I don't show his face. I show his feet, I show his back, I show his motorcycle. So a lot of people have seen that part of him, but they don't see his face because that is a personal boundary. I show things and encourage you to show things that align with your values. If you value nature, if you value time with your dogs, share stories about the things that you value. And share anything that will inspire, connect, intrigue, challenge you and your target market. That's a fantastic way for them to connect with you on a completely different level. Gives both of you the opportunity to expand equally. And obviously, share anything that's safe and productive. So here are some things you don't want to share. And I can't believe I have to say this, but I always do, just to clarify, don't share anything that's R-rated, unless that's your business, in which case I'll just assume that you've got that handled. Don't share anything that will give your ideal client or your competitor a way to question your values, your authenticity, or something that they can use against you. And don't share anything that could hurt someone. You know, we all have really fantastic stories about clients, right? Clients that started out in a bit of a mess and then shifted, and now they've had this amazing success and they're growing and they're changing. But unless you have their specific permission, don't share that information with the world. Make sure you get that permission and don't overshare. See, the 3 things I just mentioned are rated, sharing things that could hurt somebody. And finally, don't share what you think you should share just because someone tells you you should. So great. All the things I just shared with you, take those under advisement and then really think critically and logically about anything you want to share. One of the free gifts I have for you today is a list of 9 do's and don'ts for vulnerable sharing. So all of that information is written out for you, and they have kindly put the URL for that on the crawl at the bottom of your screen. The second pillar is alignment. And that goes directly to being aligned with your heart and being aligned with your soul and being able to take that alignment from your personal life into your business, right? Because like I said before, it's really hard to run a successful business if you're out of alignment. So think about it like this. One of the really important things I do is write. Every week I put some writing out, whether it's a blog or a journal post or an article. But I never go into those, or won't say never, I rarely go into those with the intent to share something really spiritual that happened to me. And I would bet 95% of the time, there's something in there that is spiritually focused, even if it's just a line saying, you know, and the universe showed me how to do this. Now, if I'm not in alignment and sharing my spiritual beliefs with my community, with my clients, I actually have to go through everything I write and pull those references out. Or depending on how busy I am, my team has to go through and pull those references out. So being in alignment at the end of the day actually saves you time and energy. And being in alignment and sharing your spirituality doesn't mean that you have to share the intricacies of yoga just because you attend a weekly yoga class and talk about it. It does mean that you can share what happens while you're at the yoga practice. There's no expectation that you are a guru just because you're sharing what you do in your personal spiritual space. You know, that's one of the things people ask me about. And they'll say, you know, but I'll have to answer all these questions about yoga or about channeling or whatever it might be. And really, the people that are watching you don't expect you to be an expert in that area. They know where your expertise lies. And when you are sharing your spiritual values, everybody around you gets a deeper sense of who you are. Now, I say spiritual values, and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to identify exactly what those values are. This is an opportunity to really get your team involved with you. And if you don't have a team, ask the folks that are closest to you. What do I do on a daily basis that aligns with the spiritual things that I talk about and the spiritual things that I value? You know, when you bring your team into that, you actually give them additional ways for them to support you, including things like just having a much better idea of how to answer customer service questions for you. I mean, it really changes the way they support everything that you do. It creates efficiencies and makes them much more effective in their business or in their day-to-day activities for you. So one of the other things about being really aligned, and I know this happens to all of us, you get partway through your launch or partway through delivering something and you realize it just feels not quite right. And a lot of that is alignment. Somehow it's out of alignment for you. And it can take a lot of time to get that launch or that delivery back into alignment with who you are and how you really feel. But if you start in an aligned place, you eliminate all the extra work of having to go back through that, which saves you a ton of time and effort and saves your team time and effort. So aligning with your soul and keeping that alignment obvious in your web content, in your marketing, in your programs, is going to save you so much time and effort. The third pillar is redefining productivity. So a traditional definition of productivity is, your client calls, working on copy, creating social media. But I encourage you to open up your definition of productivity to include space for ideas and refueling and creativity to emerge. All of us bring that into our businesses, and to not include it at something that's super productive for you is actually doing yourself a disservice. When you start to consider those things very productive and build them into your planning, you actually create a much less chaotic environment for you and your team. So how is that? How does that look? Well, for instance, if you're creating a plan to launch something and you know that before you review copy or before you write your marketing, you really need to take half an hour, get outside, ground yourself, make sure you're connected to the universe. That time should be built into your planning. Otherwise you end up using that time and potentially something doesn't get done on time, or something is late, or you're out grounding yourself when other people are looking for you. It's really interesting how when we take care of ourselves in that way, we sometimes forget to communicate that with the people that are around us. So if you include that in your plan as part of what it takes for you to be 100% productive, you eliminate that chaotic environment. Redefining productivity also goes back to that alignment piece a little bit with the blogs and the writing that I mentioned, right? If you're redefining productivity, when you're including the spiritual pieces of your life, you're no longer searching for social media content or blog content or any kind of content. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you how long it can take to come up with that content sometimes, right? When you have to eliminate a whole branch of it, a whole section of it, it just makes things take so much longer. And it actually makes it much less simple to be, I was going to say reactive, but that's not the word I want. Much less simple to just move with what's happening with you right now, to really stay in flow with everything that's happening with you at this moment. For instance, if you're outside and something happens, if your spirit animal shows up for you, it's so easy to real quick create a blog, create a social content about that. And if you're not including that spiritual side of you, then you're not able to weave that in. Productivity also comes into play when you're working with your clients. So many of us talk to our clients about how they're moving through every day, right? It can be as simple as saying, here's an idea, give it some thought overnight, see how you feel about it in the morning. Well, normally we're like, see how you feel about it. How does it sound in your head? And when we're spiritual, what we really want to say is, how does that feel in your body? Does that sound expansive? Does it make you want to contract? And when you open that spiritual door to have those conversations with your clients, you actually provide a whole nother level of service and a whole different level of allowing and helping your clients to come into connection with themselves and who they are. So at the end of the day, you end up opening up new markets and places for new visibility. So the 3 pillars of profitability are sharing vulnerably, alignment, redefining productivity. But how does that practically feed into profitability? So there are a couple ways. And number one, you open the door to a whole new level of clients, a whole different group of clients who really value that spirituality, and you open the door to a new level of service. And both of those things go directly towards your bottom line. Instead of spending hours coming up with social media posts, you have a much easier line because you can talk about the spirituality that impacts you every day. And instead of having that team chaos because you haven't planned for the time to go out and ground, now your team is 100% on board with you, knows the processes that you're following, and can plan accordingly. You know, I build space every day into my day to get grounded. And normally that looks like a walk. It's my chance to really get connected with the universe. And it's a deeply important practice to me. So if I didn't talk about things that happened to me, that happened on that walk, I wouldn't be sharing so much information. It would knock out a whole pile of experiences, of interaction with the universe, of interaction with my spirit animals, because they do show up then, and just a whole category of blogs and posts and articles that I would never have access to. So think about it like this, and this is where I get a little bit geeky around numbers, so bear with me. I walk for roughly an hour a day, just about every day of the week. And when you roll that out over 12 months, that's about 310 hours of time a year that I spend taking walks. So think of things that you do. Do you go to yoga? Do you go see a channel? Do you see a spiritual mentor? And how much that time adds up to over the course of a year. Spirituality is deeply important if you're spending that much time on it. So keeping it out of your business really impedes your ability to be as profitable as you could be. I just recently had an experience where I was trying to get outside to take a walk. And, you know, very intuitive. So I listen. When the universe says, hey, hang up those keys, I hang them up. And then put that glass away and move that jacket and do this and do that. And so I was following my intuition, thinking, I am never, ever going to get out of this house and get this walk done. But that's what we do, right? We follow our intuition. Well, that walk turned into something really interesting. As I was taking the walk, a pine cone, one of these giant pine cones with a really hard bottom, fell on the road directly in front of me. It smacked so hard. It hit the pavement and literally bounced up and off of and into the woods. Well, when I was thinking about it, I thought, wow, if I had not paid attention to my intuition, if I hadn't taken the time to hang up those keys, that pine cone could have hit me directly on the head. And it came down hard enough that there could have been a bump, there could have been blood, it could have been really, really not good. But you follow your intuition, and the universe makes sure that you don't get that giant bump on your head from the pine cone. But the thing about it is that led to a blog post. I think I did a social media meme about it, and I wrote an article about it, all from that one walk, and they came really easily because the information was right, top of mind for me. And I've been able to use the example for other people in other ways with my clients. Weaving the 3D into the 5D increases the integrity of your brand and the strength of your message. Your audience has the opportunity to resonate so much more strongly with who you are, what you stand for, and how you do your work. Sharing vulnerably and staying in alignment increases your productivity. And when you redefine your productivity, you open the doors to more alignment with your soul and with your team and with your clients. My spirituality is woven into everything I do, and I know it has added to my bottom line over time. I work with folks to weave all of those things together so that they can really build their business and grow their business in a way that resonates so strongly with them. And I help folks get their message out into the world in an even bigger way. So today I mentioned one free gift, and that is those guidelines for how to share vulnerably or what not to share. But there's a second free gift that I include, and that's a sheet to work out what your spiritual values are and how they actually manifest in your business so that you can really, really harness those and take advantage of them. I so much appreciate your time today. I encourage you to listen to everybody else and just soak in all of the fantastic information that people are sharing with you. Have a fantastic day.